Fancy a trip down a rabbit hole with me? This week I've been on a little mini adventure. This is me and my sister on the boat we grew up on. As children, my sister and I were used to hearing about my mum's adventures with disabled people. There was the tiny lady with legs that would snap easily who rode in a wheelchair with a leg plate that would fold up if lifted. And there was a man who crashed into walls on a motorised flatbed. And these were the stories we remembered as children. And they led to more. This week I've been writing about them for an upcoming edition of PMLD Link, charting the visibility of disabled people through time and the challenges that come along with that visibility, both to the people and to those who take part in making visible that which others think should be hidden. A child's understanding is one thing. I asked more as I reached my teenage years, and my mum told me about being stopped in public by people shocked she'd brought her disabled relative outside. My dad told me that the best way to get disabled people access to a pub is to get the drunks at the bar on side when the landlord says they can't come in. One of the big stories that I've heard often was a 3-month adventure in Italy. Tony, the lady whose legs might snap, wanted to study Italian and had enrolled on a 3-month course. She needed someone to help her get there and support her while she was there. And my mum, in her gap year before starting at Oxford to study physics, later psychology, had 3 months to spare. I can't remember the church that she names, but it's got 20 steps down from some magnificent altar. But I can remember the look on my mum's face as she, 60 years on, reenacts the events, how terrified she was as a 17-year-old with palms sweating in the hot Italian weather as she faced bumping, fragile Tony down those steps, nor how in awe of Tony's adventurous spirit she remains to this day. Once Mum had taken Tony on holiday, other residents wanted to go away too, and the spare 17-year-old, up for a challenge, got to go to Guernsey, London, the New Forest, all about the place. She began to dream of one day converting a double-decker bus to make these adventures easier. And this week, I happened upon this internet rabbit hole. It occurred to me to wonder what had happened to Tony. And so I Googled Tony Lee Court, the place Mum had volunteered at her weekends during her A-levels and on through her gap year. I didn't know if it was Lee Court or Leigh Court or Leigh Court. It turns out it was Le Court, the very first ever Cheshire home. In 1948, the war hero group captain Leonard Cheshire, leader of the Dam Busters Squadron, took a terminally ill former airman, Arthur Dykes, who'd got nowhere else to go, into his country manor, Leigh Court, near Liss in Hampshire. And that was the start of the Cheshire Homes movement. My mum remembers how, at the time, if you lived in a care facility, you could be moved at any point. But if you got a room at Leigh Court, it was your home for life and you wouldn't be moved on. So it offered people the chance to put down roots and to really feel at home. The Cheshire Homes ran with the determined self-help principle. My dad's memory of Bobby Bear, who was the guy who rode the motorised flatbed, trying to get into the lift, is like a textbook tiny example of this. Bobby wore prism glasses intended to help him see where he was going. He had a lever to steer the chair and a tube into which he could blow for go or suck for stop. And Dad says there were no speed controls on the bed and go was pretty significant. And he remembers the clattering of Bobby trying to get into the lift, but staff wouldn't go to push him in. He'd be allowed to do it himself, no matter what chips come out of the wall or dents to the woodwork ensue. The residents were encouraged to lead their own lives, and the expansion of the homes relied on community mobilisation and volunteers. A lot was decentralised within the homes. Residents formed committees to have a say in what went on. One of the things residents did was run a community magazine, The Cheshire Smile. That's where some of these pictures are coming from. And this week I discovered its archives, and in them the pictures of Bobby Bear, Robert Simmons, and Tony, Tonette Edwards, from my parents' stories. It's just so strange seeing people who to me as a child were almost made up because they were in stories actually there in these black and white pictures. The picture of Bobby in the sewing room exemplifies another aspect of life in Lee Court, that residents were not viewed as unable but considered capable of working with the right adjustments. Whilst I was looking at these, I turned up all sorts of stories about what about this for an early piece of AAC. Next time I see Mum, I'll ask her if she knew Dick. This is a photo taken during the time when Mum was working at Lee Court. It's been fun reading about how the residents of Lee Court test drove many early attempts at electronic wheelchairs. My dad remembers being staggered when he first saw a joystick mounted on a wheelchair to allow a person to self-direct their movement. Tony, who Mum remembers as so adventurous, became one of the pioneers of the disabled rights movement, rejecting the idea that disabled people should just accept the lives others had planned for them. She championed independence, choice, equal opportunities, and was an active member of the Union of the Physically Impaired Against Segregation, the UPIAS, whose work helped lay the foundations of the social model of disability. My mum met my dad during her first year at university. He dreamed of building a boat and sailing around the world. And this is their wedding photo, years later. And the residents from Lee Court are now there, not as people Mum works with, but as friends she kept in touch with throughout life. This Sunday she went into the loft and we found the letters they wrote to each other. My mum's handwriting hasn't changed through all these years, and the residents' letters are typed. And I wonder if it was on one of those machines. I've got no doubt that Tony's pioneering spirit, if not inspired, then certainly supported my mum's own, so that when Dad pitched they build a boat by hand and set sail with a baby, she was up for it. That baby's me. Her correspondence with the residents of Lee Court show that they cheered her on. All through my growing up, Mum talked about people with disabilities. She worked as a respite foster carer, volunteered at the local special school summer play scheme. The language she used was often of its time. In the copies of the Cheshire Smile I've been sifting through, I've seen spastics celebrated for getting married and people referring to themselves as vegetables. I remember when Mum shifted from calling people with Down syndrome mongoloids to using the term Down syndrome. When I've been writing about language change, as I did in the Sensory Rooms book, in the Sensory Being book, and in the Scale of the Spectrum recently, I'm always aware of how language changes around us, and that someone saying the wrong thing doesn't necessarily mean they have the wrong attitudes. Because of my mum, people with disabilities were never hidden in my life. When I was 2, my mum's father became a paraplegic when a speeding driver crashed into him on a roundabout. He was very embarrassed by being disabled, a once tall, powerful man who raced yachts and loved racket sports, reduced in his own eyes to someone seated in a chair with a bag of wee strapped to his leg. I am so grateful for disabled advocates now who, like Mark Webb, who is an ambassador at Parallel with me, proudly declares things about the bag of wheat strapped to his leg, and that being out and proud about the different way in which lives can be led really means a lot to me. So I know things are changing. Never fast enough. On one page of A Cheshire Smile, I found a list of obituaries, and it was notable that the last few on the list had lived to an age that would be considered, not old enough. This month, the latest and last leader report was published, announcing that avoidable deaths, and that word, you have to take it, avoidable deaths, not deaths as a result of illness, deaths as a result of it's deaths that were avoidable, stand at 39% for people with learning disabilities. It's nearly double that of the general population. Adults with learning disabilities die an average of 19 years younger than the general population, 56.6% dying before the age of 65. If you're currently working to create change, my dad at 20 had to mobilise drunks at bars to enable access, and now those same pubs have a legal obligation to have ramps. So change is happening. I wonder what my children will talk about in another 50 years' time.